Hey, welcome back. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is the Unexplained Archive. You know, living in New York, you get used to the sound of airplanes. That distant, constant hum in the background of the city. It's the sound of people going places, of stories crossing continents. Most of the time, we don't think twice about it. We trust the engineering, the protocols, the people in the cockpit. But sometimes, a story comes along that shakes that trust to its core, and then layers something even more inexplicable on top of it. A story where the logical world of an engineer like me meets something that defies all the schematics. This is a story about one of the most well-documented aviation disasters in history, and the haunting, persistent rumor that the dead didn't just vanish that night. They kept showing up for work. On December 29, 1972, Eastern Airlines Flight 401 was descending into Miami International Airport. A Lockheed L-1011 TriStar, a brand new, state-of-the-art whisper liner. On board were 163 passengers and 13 crew members, many heading home for the new year. The flight had been routine, but as the plane began its final approach, the cockpit crew noticed a small anomaly. The landing gear indicator light, the one that confirms the nose gear is down and locked, hadn't illuminated. It was probably just a burned-out bulb. They decided to abort the landing, put the plane on autopilot, and climb to a holding pattern to troubleshoot. The captain, the first officer, and the flight engineer became intensely focused on that tiny light. They spent precious minutes trying to remove its housing, utterly absorbed. And in that focused silence, no one noticed the almost imperceptible descent. The autopilot had been accidentally disengaged. By the time the altitude warning chimed, it was too late. Flight 401 plowed into the vast, dark expanse of the Florida Everglades. The impact was catastrophic. The plane disintegrated upon hitting the swampy ground. In an instant, 101 lives were lost. It was a tragedy born from a simple, cascading series of human errors, a story heartbreaking enough on its own. The National Transportation Safety Board investigation would become a cornerstone of modern aviation safety, leading to new cockpit procedures and crew resource management training. But in the months and years that followed, a different kind of story began to circulate among Eastern Airlines employees. It started as a whisper in crew lounges, a strange anecdote passed between mechanics. They began reporting sightings. Of the crew, flight attendants and pilots claimed to see Captain Bob Loft and Second Officer Don Repo, two men who had died in the Everglades, on other L-1011 flights. These weren't fleeting glimpses in shadowy cabins. They were detailed, interactive encounters. A senior flight attendant preparing a galley on a later flight turned to see Don Repo sitting in a jump seat. He looked at her and said, "You don't need to worry about the pre-flight check. I've already done it." And then he was gone. On another flight, a captain entered the cockpit to find a man in uniform sitting in his seat. He recognized him from company photos. It was Bob Loft. The figure reportedly said, "You won't need to worry about this plane. We'll take care of it," and vanished. But the stories got more specific, more technical. Don Repo was allegedly seen by an engineer during a pre-flight inspection, pointing out a specific hydraulic issue. When the mechanic checked, the problem was exactly where the apparition had indicated. Now, from my perspective as an engineer, my first instinct is to deconstruct this. Grief, stress, the power of suggestion. After such a traumatic event, it's natural for a close-knit community like an airline staff to be psychologically primed. They were flying the same model of aircraft, working with the same layouts, the same uniforms. The mind seeks patterns, it seeks closure. Maybe a tired crew member would see a familiar posture, a similar face, and their brain, swimming in fatigue and subconscious memory, would fill in the rest. That is the clean, logical explanation. And it's probably the right one for most of these accounts. But what has always fascinated me is the consistency and the character of these apparitions. They weren't portrayed as mournful, wandering ghosts. They were depicted as active, conscientious employees, still on duty. Captain Loft and Officer Repo were, by all accounts, dedicated, meticulous professionals. The stories about them reflected that. They were seen not reliving their crash, but inspecting aircraft, reassuring crews, fixing problems. It's as if their sense of duty was so deeply ingrained, it transcended the event that ended their lives. There's another layer here, one that ties back to the physical world in a way I can't ignore. After the crash, salvageable parts from the wreckage of Flight 401 were, as was standard practice, removed, refurbished, and used as spares in other Eastern Airlines L-1011s. This is a cold, practical, economic reality of aviation, and it created a tangible, physical link between the doomed aircraft and the rest of the fleet. The very planes on which these apparitions were seen often contained components, hydraulic lines, avionic panels, maybe even seats, that had been pulled from the swamp. So the legend grew. The ghosts weren't just attached to the memory of the flight, but to the physical pieces of the aircraft itself. The souls of Loft and Repo were following their ship, or parts of it, ensuring the safety of other crews, preventing another disaster. It's a narrative that makes a kind of profound, mythical sense. It turns a cost-saving measure into a haunting, and a tragedy into a guardian tale. Sitting in my apartment here, with the hum of New York's own traffic as a backdrop, I think about what this story is really about. It's not just a ghost story. It's a story about responsibility. The initial crash was a failure of shared responsibility in the cockpit. The aftermath, the legend, seems to be the universe's way of reasserting it in the most bizarre way possible. It's about how we cope with catastrophic error and how we seek to restore order. We, as humans, have a deep need for patterns and for justice, even if we have to invent a supernatural kind. The idea that these two men are still on the job, forever fixing their fatal mistake, provides a dark comfort. It says that carelessness is not the final word, that vigilance is eternal. The documented sightings eventually became so frequent and so credible to the staff that Eastern Airlines management felt compelled to issue a memo threatening to ground anyone caught spreading ghost stories. Think about that. A major corporation dealing with hard facts and liability was forced to address a paranormal rumor with an official policy. That, to me, is one of the most compelling parts of the entire mystery. The official record of Flight 401 is closed. The cause is known, the safety lessons were learned and implemented. But the unofficial record, the one held in the memories and experiences of the people who lived in its shadow, remains open. It lives in those eerie, quiet moments at 35,000 feet, in the glow of instrument panels, in the shared glance between crew members who've heard the stories. It's a reminder that our world is built by engineers like me, but it is understood and haunted by storytellers like us. Thank you for listening to this journey into the Echo Plains. If you were intrigued by today's episode, please share it with someone who loves a good mystery. For more deep dives into the unexplained, subscribe to the Unexplained Archive wherever you get your podcasts. This is Abnul J. Farabi for Light Not Studios. Stay curious,